What if the blind billionaire everyone pitied already knew the woman beside him was trying to destroy him? Don't give him the blue pills tonight. Claire Bennett froze. Hidden behind the half-open laundry room door, the young maid watched Natalie Sterling lower her voice as thunder shook the massive New York mansion. He's starting to notice things, Natalie whispered coldly. Natalie, if Zane ever fully recovers his sight, everything is over. Claire's breath caught. Inside the dim hallway, the powerful Arab billionaire sat alone near the fireplace, his dark glasses hiding lifeless eyes everyone believed could no longer see. But then, his head slowly turned toward the voices. The room fell silent. Because for one terrifying second, Claire could have sworn he was looking directly at them. And what Natalie didn't know was that the blind billionaire had been pretending for months. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. And don't forget to subscribe, because this story might change the way you see people forever. Rain slid slowly down the tall glass windows of the Al-Hadid mansion, turning the lights of Manhattan into blurred streaks of gold and silver. Inside the estate, everything looked perfect. The marble floors reflected the glow of crystal chandeliers. Expensive paintings lined the walls. Soft piano music drifted through the enormous living room, where wealthy guests often gathered for private dinners and charity events. But behind the beauty of the mansion, tension lived in every corner, especially around Zayn al-Hadid. The 38-year-old Arab billionaire had once been known as one of the sharpest business minds in America. Hotels, luxury resorts, tech investments, private aviation. His empire stretched across 3 continents. And then came the accident. A black SUV, a rainy Chicago highway, headlines everywhere. The billionaire who lost his sight. Since then, the public had rarely seen him. Rumors spread constantly. Some said he had become bitter and broken. Others claimed he was preparing to disappear from public life forever. Only a handful of people knew the truth. Zane's vision had partially returned months ago. Not fully, but enough. Enough to recognize faces. Enough to read expressions. Enough to see the lies around him. And so he continued pretending to be blind, because a man who appeared helpless often discovered who people truly were. That was how he first noticed Claire Bennett. The young maid quietly pushed a cleaning cart down the west hallway while the rest of the staff rushed around preparing for another dinner party. Her dark blonde hair was tied into a loose bun. Her uniform was simple and faded from too many washes. Exhaustion rested beneath her eyes, but she still moved carefully, respectfully. Claire never complained, even when others did. "Claire," Mrs. Whitmore called sharply. "The upstairs guest rooms still aren't finished." "I'm going," Claire answered quickly. "And don't forget the library. Miss Sterling wants everything spotless before the investors arrive." Claire nodded softly. "Yes, ma'am." She kept moving. No arguments. No attitude. Most of the staff avoided Zane completely. Some pitied him. Others feared him. Claire treated him like a human being. That alone made her different. As she passed the grand piano room, she noticed Zane sitting alone near the fireplace. The billionaire wore a black, tailored suit despite being inside the house. His dark glasses hid his eyes while one hand rested on a silver cane beside him. He looked calm, but lonely. Claire slowed her steps. "You haven't eaten much today," she said gently. Several nearby workers immediately froze. Nobody casually spoke to Zayn al-Hadid, especially not servants, but Zayn simply turned his head slightly toward her voice. "I'm not very hungry." His voice was low and controlled, carrying the quiet authority of a man used to commanding rooms without effort. Claire hesitated. Then she surprised herself. "My son says soup helps when people are stressed." A faint smile almost touched Zayn's mouth. "Does he?" She nodded before realizing he supposedly could not see her. "He's 6, she explained softly. "He thinks soup fixes everything." For the first time that day, Zane genuinely smiled. It was small, almost invisible, but real. From the staircase above them, Natalie Sterling watched the interaction with cold eyes. The tall blonde woman descended slowly in a silk cream-colored dress, diamonds glittering around her neck. To outsiders, she looked elegant enough to belong beside a billionaire. But behind closed doors, Natalie was something else entirely. Controlling, cruel, obsessed with status, especially around people she considered beneath her. "Claire," Natalie said sharply, "why are you standing around talking?" Claire immediately stepped back. "I'm sorry, Miss Sterling. I was just—" "You were hired to clean, not socialize." The room fell silent. Claire lowered her eyes. "Yes, ma'am." Natalie's expression softened instantly as she approached Zane, like flipping a switch. "Darling," she said sweetly, touching his shoulder, "the investors will arrive soon. Do you want me to guide you upstairs first?" Zane remained still. Claire noticed something strange. Whenever Natalie touched him, his jaw tightened slightly, almost like he disliked it. "I'm fine here," he answered calmly. Natalie forced a smile. "As you wish." But the moment she turned away from him, the warmth vanished from her face completely. Claire quietly pushed her cleaning cart away. Still, she could feel Natalie's eyes following her down the hallway. Hours later, the mansion became louder as luxury cars filled the circular driveway outside. Investors, politicians, celebrities. Everyone wanted access to Zayn al-Hadid's empire. Claire continued cleaning upstairs while thunder rolled beyond the windows. Her phone vibrated inside her apron pocket. She quickly answered in a whisper. "Hey, buddy. Mom?" Eli's tiny voice sounded weak. "When are you coming home?" Pain tightened inside her chest. "Soon." "You promise?" Claire closed her eyes briefly. Her son had been sick for weeks. Hospital visits, medication, bills she could barely afford. Every extra shift mattered. "I promise," she whispered. After hanging up, she leaned against the wall for a moment, exhausted. That was when she heard voices nearby, Natalie, and a man. Claire froze. The library door was slightly open downstairs. "Once the wedding is over," Natalie whispered coldly, "everything becomes ours." Claire's heartbeat slowed. A second voice answered. Marcus Doyle, Zane's financial advisor. "You need patience," Marcus murmured. "The transfer documents aren't finalized yet." Natalie sounded irritated. "He trusts me completely." "And what about his security team? Ryan Keller suspects too much." Natalie snapped. "But it won't matter once I have legal control." Claire stared toward the doorway in confusion. "Legal control? Of what?" Marcus lowered his voice further. "As long as Zane remains dependent on you, this works." Claire's stomach tightened. Dependent. The word sounded wrong. Very wrong. Then Natalie laughed softly, a cold, chilling sound. "Please," she said. "A blind billionaire is far easier to manage than a powerful one." Claire stopped breathing. Inside the living room nearby, Zane sat silently beside the fire, motionless. But upstairs, Claire suddenly noticed something terrifying. His head slowly tilted upward, toward the library, toward Natalie's voice. And for the briefest moment, she realized he might have heard every word. The thunder outside shook the mansion again, but it was nothing compared to the feeling growing inside Claire Bennett's chest. Because something inside this house was deeply wrong. and she had the horrible feeling that the danger surrounding Zayn al-Hadid was only beginning. By 7 o'clock that evening, the al-Hadid mansion no longer felt like a home. It felt like a stage. Luxury cars lined the driveway, while photographers gathered outside the gates, hoping to catch glimpses of celebrities and investors entering the estate. Inside, waiters carried silver trays beneath crystal chandeliers, while soft jazz floated through the enormous ballroom. Everything had to be perfect, because Natalie Sterling demanded perfection. "Those flowers are crooked," she snapped at one employee. "Fix them." Her sharp heels clicked across the marble floor as terrified workers rushed around her. Claire Bennett quietly adjusted table settings near the dining hall, trying to avoid attention. She had already worked 12 hours, but the night was far from over. Mrs. Whitmore approached, carrying a clipboard. "Claire, you're serving the West Lounge tonight." Claire looked surprised. "I thought I was assigned upstairs." Miss Sterling changed it personally. Something about that made Claire uneasy. Before she could ask another question, Natalie's cold voice interrupted behind her. "Try not to embarrass the house tonight." Claire turned quickly. "I'll do my best, Miss Sterling." Natalie glanced at Claire's simple uniform with obvious disgust. "Yes," she said quietly. "That's exactly what worries me." Then she walked away. The comment stung more than Claire wanted to admit. Around her, some of the other workers avoided eye contact. Others simply looked sympathetic. Everyone knew Natalie enjoyed humiliating people weaker than herself, especially women she considered replaceable. The party officially began moments later. Laughter echoed through the mansion as wealthy guests filled the ballroom holding champagne glasses worth more than Claire's monthly rent. Politicians shook hands with investors. Models posed for photographs. And in the center of it all sat Zayn al-Hadid, the blind billionaire. He remained calm near the fireplace lounge while conversations flowed around him. His black suit was perfectly tailored, his posture composed, his dark glasses hiding any trace of emotion. To the guests, he looked vulnerable. To Claire, he looked observant. Almost too observant. She noticed the way his head tilted slightly whenever people spoke near him, the way his fingers subtly tightened around his cane whenever Natalie's voice changed tone, like a man listening carefully, watching without eyes. Claire carried a tray of champagne into the West Lounge, where several wealthy women sat gossiping near the windows. One of them glanced at Claire dismissively. "She's pretty for a maid." Another laughed lightly. "That's probably why Natalie keeps her hidden upstairs." Gun. Claire kept her expression neutral. Years of struggling had taught her something important. Humiliation only lasted longer when people saw it hurt you. She quietly offered drinks while pretending not to hear them. Across the room, Natalie watched everything carefully and smiled. A few minutes later, she approached Claire carrying a glass of red wine. "Careful," Natalie said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "These rugs cost more than your entire salary." Several people chuckled. Claire lowered her eyes politely. "Yes, Miss Sterling." Then it happened. Natalie suddenly turned and accidentally slammed directly into Claire's tray. Red wine exploded across the front of Claire's uniform. The tray crashed onto the marble floor. Glasses shattered everywhere. The entire room fell silent. "Oh my God!" Natalie gasped dramatically. "Claire, look what you've done!" Claire stared at her in disbelief. "You walked into me," she whispered before she could stop herself. Natalie's expression instantly hardened. "Excuse me?" Every eye in the room turned toward Claire. The wealthy guests watched like people observing entertainment. Claire's cheeks burned with embarrassment. I'm sorry," she said quietly. One man smirked. "These agencies really hire anyone nowadays." Another woman shook her head. Completely unprofessional. Claire knelt quickly, trying to clean the broken glass with trembling hands. No one helped her, not one person. Then suddenly, another hand reached down beside hers. Claire looked up in shock. Zayn al-Hadid. The room froze. The billionaire slowly crouched beside the broken glass despite his supposed blindness. "You'll cut yourself," he said calmly. Natalie's face tightened immediately. "Darling, let the staff handle it." But Zayn ignored her. Claire noticed something strange again. His movements were too precise, too careful, almost like he knew exactly where the broken pieces were. "I'm fine," Claire whispered nervously. "You're bleeding." Claire blinked. A small cut on her finger had begun dripping blood. How had he noticed that? For one dangerous second, their eyes met behind his dark glasses, and Claire felt the sudden terrifying sensation that he could see far more than he admitted. Natalie stepped forward quickly. "Claire," she snapped, "go clean yourself up before you ruin the evening further." Claire stood immediately. "Yes, Miss Sterling." As she hurried toward the service hallway, humiliation burned inside her chest. Not because of the wine, not even because of the guests laughing at her, but because her son was sitting in a tiny apartment across the city waiting for her to come home, while strangers treated her like she was worthless. Inside the employee restroom, Claire scrubbed wine stains from her sleeves while trying not to cry. The door suddenly opened behind her. Natalie entered slowly. The sweet public smile was gone. "You embarrassed me tonight," Natalie said coldly. Claire turned around. "I didn't mean to." "I don't care what you meant." Natalie stepped closer. "You seem to forget your position here." Claire stayed silent. "That man out there," Natalie continued quietly, "belongs in rooms with powerful people, not maids desperate for attention." Claire stared at her in disbelief. "I wasn't trying to—" "Don't lie to me." Natalie's voice dropped lower. "I saw the way you looked at him." Claire's face paled. This wasn't about the wine anymore. Natalie was jealous, and somehow threatened. "I would never do anything inappropriate," Claire said carefully. Natalie gave a cold smile. "Good, because women like you should remember how easily lives can fall apart." Then she walked out. Claire remained frozen beside the sink long after the door closed. Her phone suddenly vibrated. A text message from the hospital. "Eli's fever is getting worse. Please call when possible." Fear crashed into her immediately. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands. But before she could dial, voices echoed from the hallway outside. Natalie. And a man. Marcus Doyle. Claire instinctively moved closer to the restroom door. "The transfer needs to happen soon," Marcus whispered urgently. "It will," Natalie answered sharply. "And the medication?" Claire's stomach tightened. Natalie lowered her voice further. "He still trusts me enough to take whatever I give him." Claire stopped breathing. Marcus sounded nervous. "If Zayn discovers what's happening—" "He won't," Natalie interrupted coldly. "A blind man only sees what people allow him to see." Footsteps approached suddenly. Claire backed away from the door in panic. Then silence. A few seconds later, the hallway emptied again. But Claire's heart refused to slow down, because deep down she realized something horrifying. Natalie Sterling wasn't just cruel. She was hiding something dangerous. And somehow, Zayn al-Hadid was at the center of it all. The mansion became strangely quiet after midnight. Most of the guests had gone home. Expensive glasses sat abandoned across marble tables, while exhausted staff cleaned the remains of Natalie Sterling's luxurious party. Outside, rain continued falling over Manhattan. Inside, Claire Bennett pushed her cleaning cart slowly through the second-floor hallway, trying to ignore the ache in her back and the fear growing heavier inside her chest. She could not stop thinking about what she had overheard. The medication. The transfer documents. The way Natalie spoke about Zane as if he were nothing more than a problem to manage. Claire had spent years around dishonest people. She had learned how to recognize danger long before it arrived. And Natalie Sterling felt dangerous. Very dangerous. Claire paused outside Zane's office door when she heard movement inside. The billionaire was alone. She hesitated for a moment before knocking softly. "Come in," his calm voice answered. Claire entered carefully. The office was enormous, lined with dark wood shelves and city lights stretching beyond the tall windows. Zane sat near the fireplace without his cane in hand, one arm resting along the leather chair beside him. For a moment, Claire had the strange feeling he looked less blind at night, less vulnerable. "You're still awake," she said quietly. "So are you." His voice remained low and controlled, but tonight there was exhaustion beneath it. Claire noticed unopened medication bottles sitting beside him on the table. Her stomach tightened instantly. "Do you need anything?" she asked. Zane turned his head slightly toward her. "Everyone else already asked me that tonight." The answer surprised her. "And what did you tell them?" "The truth." A faint smile touched his mouth. "That I prefer silence." Claire almost smiled back. Almost. But the memory of Natalie's conversation returned immediately. She glanced again toward the medication bottles. Zane noticed the silence. "What is it?" Claire froze. Nothing. She should say nothing. People like Natalie destroyed people like her every day. But then she remembered Eli lying sick in their tiny apartment, trusting her to protect him no matter what. And somehow, she realized Zain al-Hadid looked exactly like someone who had nobody protecting him at all. Claire swallowed carefully. "I think you should be careful who you trust." The room fell silent. For several seconds, Zain didn't move. Then slowly, he leaned back in his chair. "That's an interesting thing to say." Claire immediately regretted speaking. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I shouldn't have—" "No." His voice stopped her gently. "Continue." Claire looked down nervously. "I overheard things tonight." His expression changed slightly. "What kind of things?" Before Claire could answer, the office door suddenly opened. Natalie entered smiling. "There you are," she said sweetly before stopping abruptly at the sight of Claire. "Oh." The warmth disappeared from her face instantly. Claire stepped backward. "I was just leaving." Natalie's eyes moved between them carefully. "Were you?" The tension in the room became immediate. Uncomfortable. Claire quickly grabbed her cleaning supplies. "Good night, sir." She hurried out before Natalie could stop her. But as the door closed behind her, she heard Natalie's soft voice inside. "Why was the maid alone with you?" Claire kept walking down the hallway, her pulse racing. Something was changing. Natalie could feel it too, and that made Claire even more afraid. The next morning, the mansion staff gathered in the breakfast hall before work assignments began. Mrs. Whitmore handed out schedules while everyone quietly drank coffee. Claire looked exhausted. She had barely slept after returning home at 3 a.m. Eli's fever had worsened overnight, and she had spent hours beside his bed before coming back to work. "Claire," she looked up quickly. Ryan Keller stood near the doorway. Zane's head of security was tall, broad-shouldered, and intimidating enough to make most employees nervous. But unlike Natalie, Ryan rarely treated the staff badly. "Mr. al-Hadid wants breakfast in the East Garden," Ryan said calmly. Mrs. Whitmore blinked in surprise. "He usually eats alone." Ryan simply nodded. Today, he requested Claire specifically. The room went silent. Several workers exchanged looks immediately. Claire felt heat rise into her face. Natalie was going to hate this. Sure enough, less than 10 minutes later, Natalie appeared in the East Garden wearing an elegant white outfit and dark sunglasses. Claire had just finished pouring tea for Zane when Natalie stopped beside the table. "How lovely," she said lightly. "Private breakfasts now?" Claire stepped back immediately. "I was only serving tea." Natalie ignored her completely. Instead, she touched Zane's shoulder gently. "You should have waited for me." "I wasn't aware I needed permission to eat breakfast," Zane replied calmly. Natalie laughed softly, but her eyes hardened. "Of course not." Claire quietly turned to leave. Then Zane spoke again. "Claire," she stopped. "Yes, sir? The tea is too hot." Claire frowned slightly. She reached toward the cup carefully. "It hasn't even been poured long enough to cool yet." The moment the words left her mouth, she froze, because Zane had known the temperature without touching the cup. Natalie noticed, too. A strange silence passed between them. Then Zane calmly lifted the tea and took a sip anyway. Claire stared at him in confusion. Was it possible? No, it couldn't be. Could it? Natalie suddenly smiled tightly. "Claire, could you give us a moment alone?" "Yes, Miss Sterling." Claire walked away slowly, but before leaving the garden completely, she heard Natalie's voice lower. "She's becoming a problem." Claire's chest tightened immediately. Zane answered calmly. "She's an employee. She's getting too comfortable around you. And that bothers you?" Natalie remained silent for a second too long. Claire hurried away before she could hear more, but the fear inside her continued growing. Later that afternoon, Claire cleaned the upstairs hallway near Zane's private suite. The mansion was unusually quiet again. That was when she saw it. Natalie emerging from Zane's medical room. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but then Claire noticed the woman quickly slipping something small into her purse. A prescription bottle. Natalie looked around carefully before closing the door behind her. Claire ducked behind the hallway corner instantly. Her breathing became shallow. Why would Natalie secretly remove medication from Zane's room? The answer came moments later. Marcus Doyle appeared from the opposite hallway. "You switched them?" he whispered urgently. Natalie nodded. "For now." Marcus looked nervous. "This is becoming risky." Natalie's voice turned cold. "Not until the wedding. And if his vision improves faster than expected?" Natalie's eyes darkened. "Then we make sure it doesn't." Claire's blood ran cold. She pressed one trembling hand against the wall to steady herself. This wasn't manipulation anymore. This was something far worse. And suddenly, Claire realized the terrifying truth. Zayn al-Hadid might not simply be surrounded by liars. He might actually be in danger. At that exact moment, somewhere behind the closed doors of his private suite, the supposedly blind billionaire slowly removed his dark glasses and stared directly toward the hallway outside. The atmosphere inside the al-Hadid mansion changed after that night. Claire Bennett could feel it everywhere. In the quiet stares from the staff, in Natalie Sterling's cold smiles, in the way Marcus Doyle suddenly stopped talking whenever Claire entered a room, and most of all, in the strange silence surrounding Zayn al-Hadid himself. The billionaire had become even more withdrawn over the next 2 days. He spent long hours alone inside his office or walking slowly through the mansion gardens with his cane in hand. But Claire noticed something nobody else seemed to notice. He was listening, always listening. Every word, every footstep, every lie. That realization terrified her almost as much as Natalie did, because if Zayn truly suspected something was wrong, then why was he still pretending? Late Friday afternoon, Claire hurried through the employee hallway while checking her phone anxiously. 3 missed calls from the hospital. Her stomach tightened instantly. She quickly stepped into the laundry room and called back. "Ms. Bennett?" The nurse answered gently. "Eli's fever spiked again this morning." Claire closed her eyes. "Is he okay?" He's stable, but the doctor wants additional tests. Additional tests. More bills. More money she didn't have." Claire leaned against the washing machine, fighting tears. "I'll come tonight after work," she whispered. "We'll keep him comfortable until then." After the call ended, Claire remained frozen for several seconds. Exhaustion weighed heavily on her body. Fear pressed against her chest constantly now, and deep down, she knew Natalie Sterling was somehow becoming more dangerous every day. "Claire?" She jumped at the sudden voice behind her. Mrs. Whitmore stood in the doorway looking nervous. "Miss Sterling wants all staff downstairs immediately." Claire frowned. "What happened?" The older woman hesitated. "There's been an incident." The grand living room downstairs was already filled when Claire arrived. Staff members stood in tense silence near the staircase, while Natalie paced dramatically across the marble floor. Several security guards waited nearby. Marcus Doyle stood beside the fireplace, looking uncomfortable. And in the center of the room sat Zayn al-Hadid, calm, silent, unreadable behind his dark glasses. The moment Claire entered, Natalie turned sharply toward her. "There she is." Claire immediately stopped walking. A terrible feeling settled inside her stomach. Natalie crossed her arms slowly. "My diamond bracelet is missing." The room fell silent. Claire blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry?" "The Cartier bracelet my mother gave me," Natalie continued coldly. "It disappeared this morning." One of the guards stepped forward. "We need to search the staff quarters." Claire's pulse quickened immediately. This was bad. Very bad. Natalie looked directly at her. Especially hers. Claire stared at her in disbelief. "You think I stole it?" Natalie gave a soft, mocking laugh. "I think desperate people do desperate things." Humiliation spread across Claire's face instantly. The other employees shifted uncomfortably around her. Claire looked toward Zayn. He remained perfectly still, watching, listening, waiting. "I didn't take anything," Claire said carefully. Natalie tilted her head. "Then you won't mind cooperating." Before Claire could answer, two female security employees stepped forward. The room suddenly felt smaller, hotter, more suffocating. One guard searched Claire's apron pockets. Nothing. The second searched her cleaning bag. Nothing again. Natalie's expression tightened slightly. Then one of the guards froze. "There's something here." The woman slowly reached into the side compartment of Claire's bag and pulled out a diamond bracelet. The room exploded with shocked whispers. Claire's face turned completely pale. "No," her voice barely came out. "No, that's not mine." Natalie pressed one dramatic hand against her chest. "Oh my God!" Claire shook her head desperately. "I didn't steal that." The guard looked uncertain. "It was inside your bag. Someone put it there," Claire whispered. Natalie's expression instantly hardened. "So now you're accusing someone else?" Claire's breathing became uneven. She knew exactly what had happened. Natalie planted it, but how could she prove that? "You're lying," Natalie snapped suddenly. "After everything this house has done for you, I didn't take it." The words escaped louder than Claire intended. The room fell silent. For the first time since working there, she had raised her voice. Natalie stepped closer slowly. "You should be grateful we're not calling the police." Claire felt tears burning behind her eyes. Not because of the accusation, because she suddenly realized how easily powerful people could destroy someone like her. One lie. That was all it took. Then her phone rang. The sound echoed sharply through the silent room. Claire glanced down automatically. Hospital. Her heart dropped instantly. I need to answer that, she whispered. Natalie looked disgusted. You're in the middle of an investigation. My son is sick. I don't care. The cruelty in Natalie's voice shocked even some of the staff nearby. Claire's hands trembled violently now. Please, please let Eli be okay. Suddenly, Zane spoke. Answer the phone. The entire room turned toward him immediately. Natalie blinked. Darling, I said answer it. His calm voice carried quiet authority. Claire quickly picked up the call. Mom? Eli's weak voice broke her heart instantly. Hey, sweetheart. When are you coming? Claire swallowed painfully. Soon. You promise? Tears finally slipped down her cheeks. I promise. The call ended moments later, and the room felt painfully quiet afterward. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Zane slowly stood from his chair. The billionaire turned slightly toward Claire. Do you need money for your son's treatment? Natalie looked stunned. Claire shook her head immediately. I don't want charity. That wasn't my question. Claire stared at him silently. Even now, after being accused in front of everyone. He sounded calmer than anyone else in the room. Natalie quickly interrupted. Zane, this woman stole from us. Did she? The question was simple, but something beneath his voice changed. Something colder. Natalie crossed her arms tightly. The bracelet was literally inside her bag. Zane remained silent for several seconds. Then slowly, he turned his head toward Claire. Did you take it? Claire met his hidden gaze, and for some reason she felt like he could truly see her. No, she whispered. The room held its breath. Zane nodded once. I believe her. Natalie froze. What? Marcus looked shocked. Even the guards exchanged confused glances. Natalie laughed nervously. You can't be serious. But Zane's expression never changed. Claire Bennett has worked in this house for 8 months, he said calmly. If she wanted to steal something, she would have done it long ago. Natalie's face slowly hardened. This is unbelievable. Then suddenly, Claire caught something strange, a familiar scent. She looked down at the diamond bracelet still resting in the guard's hand. Perfume. Strong perfume. Expensive perfume. Her eyes widened instantly, because she recognized it, Natalie Sterling's perfume. The exact same scent Natalie wore every single day. Claire slowly lifted her eyes toward the billionaire, and for the first time, she realized someone inside this mansion was finally starting to see the truth. The rain finally stopped over Manhattan sometime after midnight, but inside the Al-Hadid mansion, the tension only grew heavier. Claire Bennett sat alone in the employee break room, staring at the untouched cup of coffee in front of her. Her hands still trembled from the humiliation downstairs. The diamond bracelet. The accusations. The way Natalie Sterling had looked at her with pure satisfaction while everyone watched. Claire had spent most of her life being underestimated. A poor waitress at 19, a struggling single mother at 22, a maid cleaning luxury homes for people who never learned her name. But tonight felt different. Because for the first time, someone powerful had actually defended her. Zayn al-Hadid. The memory confused her almost as much as it frightened her. Why had he believed her so quickly? And how had he known she was telling the truth without seeing her face? Claire closed her eyes briefly. No, there was no point thinking about that now. The real problem was Natalie, because Claire knew with absolute certainty that the woman had planted the bracelet. And if Natalie was willing to do that, what else was she capable of? The break room door opened suddenly. Claire looked up quickly. Ryan Keller entered holding a tablet in one hand. The security chief rarely looked nervous. Tonight he did. Mr. Al-Hadid wants to speak with you, Ryan said quietly. Claire immediately stood. Am I fired? Ryan studied her for a moment. No, that single word surprised her more than she expected. Ryan motioned toward the hallway. This way. The mansion was unusually silent as they walked upstairs. Most of the staff had already gone home, leaving only soft lights glowing through the enormous corridors. As they approached Zane's private office, Claire noticed Ryan lowering his voice. You should be careful around Miss Sterling. Claire looked at him sharply. You know something's wrong too. Ryan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened the office door slowly. Go inside. Zane sat near the fireplace again, dressed in dark gray slacks and a black shirt with the top buttons undone. Without the crowd around him, he looked less like a billionaire tonight, and more like a man carrying exhaustion he never spoke about. Ryan quietly closed the door behind Claire. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Zane finally broke the silence. You recognized the perfume. Claire froze instantly. He knew. I don't know what you mean, she answered carefully. Yes, you do. His voice remained calm, but there was something sharper beneath it now. Claire stared at him. You already knew Natalie framed me. Zane slowly removed his dark glasses. Claire stopped breathing. His eyes focused directly toward her. Not perfectly, but enough. Enough to see her reaction. The room suddenly felt smaller. You can see, she whispered. Partially. Claire took a step backward in shock. Oh my God. I need you to stay calm. How long? Months. The truth hit her like ice water. Every conversation, every humiliation, every moment Natalie believed he couldn't see. Zane had witnessed more than anyone realized. You let her do all of that? Claire asked quietly. Pain flickered across his face for the first time. I needed proof. Claire stared at him in disbelief. You should have stopped her, I know. Silence filled the office. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Then Zane leaned forward slightly. The bracelet wasn't the first incident. Claire's stomach tightened. What do you mean? Zane glanced toward the medication bottles resting nearby. I've suspected Natalie and Marcus were manipulating my financial accounts for months. Claire remembered the hallway conversations immediately. The transfer documents. Zane nodded once. And something else. His jaw tightened subtly. My medication. Claire felt cold all over. You know, I know the dosages have changed. Claire looked horrified. You think Natalie's doing it intentionally? Before Zane could answer, the office door suddenly opened. Ryan stepped inside quickly. You need to see this. The tension in his voice instantly changed the atmosphere. Ryan placed the tablet onto the desk and tapped the screen. Black and white security footage appeared. Laundry room hallway. Timestamp 1:14 a.m. Claire moved closer. The camera angle showed the employee lockers clearly. Then Natalie appeared on screen. Claire's heartbeat stopped. The elegant blonde woman looked around carefully before removing something from her purse. The diamond bracelet. She opened Claire's work bag and slipped it inside. The room fell silent. Claire stared at the footage in disbelief, even though she already knew the truth. Seeing it somehow hurt worse. Ryan looked furious. She disabled most of the interior cameras, he explained, but she forgot the maintenance hallway still records overnight. Zane's expression darkened slowly. How long have you had this? 10 minutes. Claire pressed one trembling hand against her mouth. Natalie had really done it. Planned everything. Manipulated everything. And somehow that made the mansion feel more dangerous than ever. Ryan tapped the tablet again. There's more. Another video appeared, this time from outside Zane's medical room. Claire's stomach dropped immediately. The footage showed Natalie entering the room late at night. Minutes later, Marcus Doyle arrived carrying a small black case. The two exchanged medicine bottles. Claire looked horrified. "Oh my God." Ryan's face hardened. "I checked the prescription records afterward." He handed several documents toward Zane. "The dosages were altered 3 times in the last 4 months." Zane read silently. Claire watched his face carefully. Something inside him changed as he scanned the papers. Not shock, not fear. Anger. Cold anger. "She's been slowing your recovery," Claire whispered. Zane didn't answer immediately. Then quietly, "She wants me dependent." The truth settled heavily over the room. Claire suddenly understood everything. Natalie never wanted Zane healthy, never wanted him strong. She wanted control. Control over his wealth, his business, his life. Ryan lowered his voice carefully. "There's another issue." Zane looked up. "The doctor who signed off on the prescription changes. Leonard Hayes." Claire frowned. "The specialist?" Ryan nodded grimly. "He suddenly withdrew $200,000 in cash last month." The room fell silent again. Claire felt sick. This was bigger than greed now. Far bigger. Zane slowly stood from his chair. Without the cane. Without hesitation. Claire watched him carefully. The billionaire walked toward the windows overlooking Manhattan, his posture straighter than she had ever seen before. Almost like the helpless man Natalie created no longer existed. "She thought I was weak," he said quietly. Lightning flashed beyond the glass. Ryan stepped closer. "What do you want to do?" Zane remained silent for several seconds. Then Claire noticed something terrifying. He wasn't angry anymore. He was calculating, like a man finally preparing for war. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the hallway outside. Natalie, laughing softly. Claire's pulse spiked instantly. Then came the sentence that froze all 3 of them completely. "If he stays blind," Natalie whispered coldly beyond the door, "I control everything." The mansion no longer felt safe. Not to Claire Bennett, not to Ryan Keller, and certainly not to Zain al-Hadid. After hearing Natalie's voice outside the office door, none of them moved for several seconds. "If he stays blind, I control everything." The sentence echoed through the room long after her footsteps disappeared down the hallway. Claire slowly turned toward Zane. The billionaire stood near the windows overlooking Manhattan, one hand clenched tightly at his side. For the first time since she had met him, he looked genuinely shaken. Not because Natalie had betrayed him, but because he had finally heard her say the truth out loud. Ryan broke the silence first. "We should contact the authorities tonight." "No." Zane's answer came instantly. Ryan frowned. "Zane, I said no." The cold authority in his voice silenced the room immediately. Claire studied him carefully. "You still don't think this is over?" Zane looked toward her slowly. "No," he admitted quietly. "I think we've only discovered part of it." A chill ran through Claire's body. Part of it? How much worse could this possibly become? Ryan crossed his arms tightly. "There's enough evidence to expose Natalie already." "Not enough to understand everything," Zane replied. Then he walked back toward the desk and picked up the medical documents Ryan had uncovered. Claire noticed his jaw tighten again as he stared at the altered prescriptions. "These medication changes started before the wedding announcement," he said quietly. Ryan looked confused. "What are you thinking?" Zane didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slowly removed another file from the drawer beneath his desk. An old newspaper clipping. Claire frowned as he handed it toward her. The headline made her stomach drop. "Billionaire Zain al-Hadid in critical condition after Chicago crash." Claire looked back up at him. The accident. Zane nodded once. It happened 14 months ago. Claire remembered the story clearly now. Everyone in America had seen it on the news. A terrible highway collision during a storm. His driver dead at the scene. Zane barely surviving. The police said the brakes failed, Ryan muttered. That's what they said publicly, Zane answered. The room became very quiet. Then slowly, Claire realized where this conversation was heading. You think the accident wasn't random? Zane's eyes darkened. I think someone wanted me helpless long before Natalie announced our engagement. Claire stopped breathing. Ryan stared at him in disbelief. That's impossible. Is it? Zane calmly slid another document across the desk. Ryan picked it up first. Then his face changed instantly. What the hell? Claire grabbed the paper next. Bank transfers. Large ones. Hundreds of thousands of dollars sent to offshore accounts months before the accident. The sender's name made her blood run cold. Marcus Doyle. Ryan looked stunned. These payments started 6 weeks before the crash. Zane nodded slowly. And stopped immediately after I lost my sight. Claire sat down heavily in the chair beside her. Oh my God. Everything suddenly felt much darker. Much bigger. This wasn't about greed anymore. This was planned. Carefully. For a long time. Ryan looked furious now. You think Marcus arranged the crash? I think Marcus profits from my weakness, Zane replied carefully. And Natalie profits from controlling me. Claire pressed trembling fingers against her forehead. The realization was horrifying. The charming fiancé, the trusted financial advisor. They hadn't simply manipulated a blind billionaire. They may have destroyed his life piece by piece. Suddenly, Ryan's phone vibrated. He glanced down quickly. Then his expression tightened. It's Dr. Hayes. Zane looked up sharply. What does he want? Ryan answered the call immediately and placed it on speaker. Dr. Leonard Hayes sounded terrified. You need to get out of that house. Claire's stomach tightened instantly. Zane's voice turned cold. Explain. The doctor breathed shakily into the phone. I didn't know how far they would go. Who? Natalie and Marcus. Ryan exchanged a dark look with Zane. Hayes continued quickly. They paid me to adjust your medications after the accident. At first I thought it was temporary. They claimed it would help stabilize your condition. And later? Silence. Then the doctor whispered, Later I realized the doses were damaging your recovery. Claire felt sick. Zane's face became unreadable. You continued anyway. They threatened me, Hayes said desperately. Marcus said if I talked, my medical license would disappear. Ryan's jaw tightened. You should have gone to the police. I know. The doctor sounded close to panic now. But tonight Marcus came to my office. The room went silent. He knows someone's investigating, Hayes whispered. And Natalie, she's losing control. Claire felt genuine fear rising inside her chest now. What did Marcus say? Zane asked quietly. Hayes hesitated. Then, he said you were never supposed to recover. The words hit the room like a gunshot. Claire stared at the phone in horror. Ryan cursed under his breath. And Zane simply stood motionless. But something inside him changed completely. All the restraint, all the patience, gone. The billionaire slowly looked toward the dark windows. She knew, he said quietly. Claire swallowed nervously. Knew what? That my vision was improving. Ryan frowned. How? Zane gave a humorless smile. Because Natalie watches me constantly. Claire suddenly remembered all the moments Natalie carefully guided him, touched him, studied him. Not out of love, out of control. Then the doctor spoke again. There's something else. Everyone froze. Hayes lowered his voice. The brake failure report from the accident. It was altered. Ryan's eyes widened. What? I reviewed the original medical files after the crash. Hayes continued nervously. There were signs someone tampered with the vehicle before impact. Claire's heart pounded violently now. This was no longer manipulation. This was attempted murder. The realization settled heavily across the room. Natalie Sterling hadn't fallen in love with a billionaire. She had hunted one. Suddenly, footsteps echoed outside the office again. Fast. Angry. Ryan instantly muted the phone. The office doors burst open. Natalie stood there breathing hard, her elegant appearance cracking for the first time. Her eyes immediately landed on Claire. Then Ryan. Then finally, Zane standing without his cane. For one frozen second, nobody moved. Natalie's face slowly lost all color. Claire watched pure panic spread across the woman's expression. Because Natalie Sterling had just realized the blind billionaire was no longer pretending. "You," she whispered weakly. Zane stared directly at her, and this time there was no hiding it. There, he was looking straight into her eyes. Natalie stepped backward slowly. "That's impossible," but Zane's voice came calm and deadly. "No," he said quietly. "What's impossible is how long you thought you could keep me helpless forever." Natalie Sterling stared at Zain al-Hadid like she had just seen a ghost. The office felt frozen in time. Rainwater still clung to the mansion windows while distant thunder rolled over Manhattan, but inside the room, nobody moved, nobody breathed. Because the blind billionaire was staring directly at his fiancée, and she knew it. "You can see," Natalie whispered. Zane remained perfectly calm. Enough. The single word shattered the last illusion she had been hiding behind. Claire Bennett watched Natalie's face carefully as panic flickered beneath the woman's polished appearance. For the first time since Claire had met her, Natalie looked afraid. Truly afraid. Ryan Keller stepped forward immediately. "You should sit down, Natalie." "I'm not sitting down," she snapped. Her voice cracked slightly. Then suddenly her expression changed again. The panic disappeared almost instantly, replaced by anger. Cold. Dangerous anger. Natalie slowly turned toward Claire. "This was you." Claire frowned. "What?" "You poisoned him against me." The accusation echoed sharply through the office. Claire stared at her in disbelief. "You framed me for theft. And now you're trying to destroy my relationship." Natalie laughed bitterly. "Of course. A maid sees a rich man showing kindness, and suddenly she thinks she belongs beside him." Claire felt humiliation rise inside her chest again. Even now. Even after everything. Natalie still believed money made her untouchable. "I never wanted anything from him," Claire answered quietly. Natalie smirked. "Please." Then she turned toward Zane again. "She's manipulating you." Ryan almost laughed in disbelief. "You planted evidence in her bag." Natalie crossed her arms tightly. "You have no proof." Without saying a word, Ryan placed the security tablet onto the desk and pressed play. The room filled with silent black and white footage. Natalie watched herself appear on screen near the employee lockers. Watched herself place the diamond bracelet into Claire's bag. Watched herself carefully glance around before walking away. The color slowly drained from her face. Nobody spoke. Claire could hear her own heartbeat pounding inside her ears. Natalie's breathing became uneven. "That video is edited." "No," Ryan answered coldly. "It isn't." Natalie looked toward Zane desperately. "Darling, listen to me. Don't call me that." The calmness in Zane's voice somehow sounded more terrifying than shouting. Natalie froze. Zane slowly walked toward her without the cane. Each step felt deliberate, controlled, powerful. Claire suddenly realized something important. The blind billionaire everyone pitied was gone. And in his place stood the man who built an empire. Natalie backed away instinctively. "You lied to me," she whispered. Zane stopped directly in front of her. "No," he answered quietly. "You lied to yourself." The silence became unbearable. Then Ryan spoke again. "There's more." Natalie's eyes widened slightly. Ryan placed several medical records onto the desk beside the security footage. "You altered his medication." Natalie immediately shook her head. "That's ridiculous. Dr. Hayes already confessed." This time, genuine fear flashed across her face. Claire saw it instantly. The woman was unraveling. "You bribed a doctor," Ryan continued. "You manipulated prescriptions designed to restore Zane's vision." Natalie's breathing quickened. "You can't prove I knew what those medications did." Zane's expression darkened. "But you did know." Natalie looked at him sharply. Then suddenly, she laughed, a cold, broken laugh. "You really want the truth?" she snapped. Nobody moved. Natalie's carefully crafted elegance finally cracked apart completely. "Yes," Zane answered. For several seconds, Natalie simply stared at him. Then all the sweetness disappeared from her face forever. "You were weak after the accident," she said coldly. "Confused, isolated, easy to control." Claire felt sick listening to her. Natalie continued walking slowly around the office as she spoke. "You stopped trusting your business partners, your board members, even your friends." Her eyes locked onto Zane. "But you trusted me." The billionaire remained silent. "And honestly," Natalie laughed bitterly, "it was pathetic." Ryan looked ready to throw her out himself. Claire could hardly believe this was the same woman who smiled gracefully in front of cameras every night. "You pretended to love him," Claire whispered. Natalie looked toward her sharply. "Love?" she repeated mockingly. "Do you think powerful men become billionaires because people love them?" Her voice hardened further. "Men like Zane buy loyalty. They buy attention. They buy relationships." Then she pointed directly at Claire. "You're naive if you think kindness changes anything." Claire felt anger rise inside her chest now. "No," she answered softly. "You're wrong." Natalie scoffed. "Am I?" Claire stepped forward slightly despite her fear. "You had everything. Money, power, status, and somehow you're still the emptiest person in this room." The office fell silent. Natalie's face twisted with rage. "You think you're better than me because you clean floors and cry over your sick child?" Claire's eyes filled with tears instantly at the mention of Eli. But she didn't look away. "At least my son knows I love him." Natalie slapped her. The sound cracked through the office like a gunshot. Claire stumbled backward in shock. Ryan immediately moved forward. But Zane was faster. He grabbed Natalie's wrist before she could move again. The room froze. Natalie stared at him in disbelief. And suddenly, for the first time, she looked afraid of him. Real fear. Zane slowly released her arm. "You're done." His voice was calm. Deadly calm. Natalie laughed shakily. "You can't destroy me that easily." "You destroyed yourself." Ryan immediately stepped toward the office door and opened it. Several members of Zane's executive board entered alongside 2 private investigators. Natalie's face went pale. Marcus Doyle was dragged in behind them by security guards. His suit was wrinkled. Sweat covered his face. "Natalie!" he shouted desperately. "They found the offshore accounts!" Claire watched panic explode across Natalie's expression. Everything was collapsing now. The lies, the money, the manipulation. All of it. Marcus looked toward Zane in terror. We can explain. No, Zane interrupted quietly. You can explain it to the police. Natalie backed away slowly. This isn't over. Zane stared directly into her eyes. Then he asked the question that finally shattered her completely. How long did you think I couldn't see the evil in you? Natalie said nothing. Because for the first time in her life, she had no control left at all. By sunrise, the scandal had already begun spreading across New York. News helicopters circled above the Al-Hadid mansion, while reporters crowded outside the gates, hoping for statements about the billionaire's canceled engagement and the financial investigation surrounding Natalie Sterling and Marcus Doyle. Inside the estate, however, the atmosphere felt completely different. Quiet, heavy, almost exhausted. The lies that had poisoned the mansion for months were finally gone. Natalie had been escorted out shortly before dawn after screaming threats at security staff and accusing everyone of betrayal. Marcus Doyle had attempted to flee through the underground garage before Ryan Keller's team stopped him. Now both were under investigation. And for the first time in a long time, the mansion felt honest. Claire Bennett stood near the kitchen window, watching the morning rain slide softly across the gardens outside. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt tired. Emotionally tired. Everything had happened so fast that her mind still struggled to process it. The fake blindness, the manipulated medication, the accident, the betrayal. A soft voice behind her interrupted her thoughts. You should be home with your son. Claire turned slowly. Zayn al-Hadid stood near the doorway without his cane again. Even now, seeing him walk normally still felt strange, different. He looked stronger somehow, not because his vision had improved, because he no longer had to pretend weakness. Claire lowered her eyes slightly. I was waiting for Mrs. Whitmore to finish payroll. Zayn studied her quietly. You're not returning here as staff. Claire blinked. What? You resigned 3 hours ago. Confusion spread across her face. I never resigned. I know. A faint smile touched his mouth. I did it for you. Claire stared at him in disbelief. You fired me? No, Zayn answered calmly. I freed you. The words caught her off guard completely. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Claire quietly shook her head. You don't owe me anything. Something changed in Zayn's expression at those words. Actually, he said softly, I owe you more than you realize. Claire frowned slightly. Before she could ask what he meant, Ryan entered the kitchen carrying a small paper bag. I found this in evidence storage, he explained while handing it toward Zayn. Claire immediately recognized the object once Zayn opened the bag. A tiny silver pendant necklace, old, worn, and strangely familiar. Zayn stared at it silently for several seconds. Then slowly, he looked toward Claire. Where did your son get this? Claire blinked in surprise. Eli? Zayn nodded once. He was wearing it in the hospital photo on your phone. Claire instinctively touched her chest. The pendant? Yes. Confusion crossed her face. He's had it for years. Zayn's fingers tightened slightly around the necklace. Since when? Claire hesitated. I don't know exactly. Maybe 4 years ago? Ryan noticed the sudden tension immediately. Zayn? But the billionaire was no longer listening. His eyes remained fixed on the pendant, as something distant and painful moved across his face. A memory. Then suddenly, he asked a question that made no sense. Was Eli ever in Chicago? Claire stared at him. What? The night of the accident. The room became completely silent. Claire's heartbeat slowed. How do you know about that? Ryan looked confused. Claire? She swallowed carefully. I was there. Zane slowly lifted his eyes toward her. Claire looked shaken now. My aunt lived outside Chicago at the time, she explained softly. Eli and I were visiting her. The billionaire didn't move. Claire continued quietly. There was a storm that night. Her voice grew distant, like someone remembering something they had tried to forget. We saw a crashed SUV near the highway. Ryan's expression changed instantly. Oh my God. Claire looked toward Zane again. The car was on fire. The billionaire stopped breathing. Claire's eyes slowly filled with emotion. There was smoke everywhere. People were driving past without stopping because they were scared the vehicle would explode. Zane stared at her silently. Then Claire smiled sadly. But Eli ran out first. Ryan looked stunned. What? Claire nodded weakly. He was only 2 years old, but he kept screaming that someone was trapped inside. Zane's hand tightened around the pendant. Claire's voice trembled slightly now. I tried pulling the driver's door open, but it wouldn't move. Flashbacks filled her mind instantly. Rain, smoke, sirens far away, and a tiny little boy crying beside the highway. Then Eli found this necklace near the road after the ambulance arrived, Claire whispered. He refused to throw it away. The kitchen felt frozen, because suddenly everything connected. Zane slowly sat down in the chair beside him, like the weight of the realization had become too heavy to carry standing up. Ryan looked between them in disbelief. That was your accident. Claire turned pale instantly. No. Zane's voice came quiet. You saved my life. Claire covered her mouth in shock. The billionaire's eyes looked distant now, haunted. I remember hearing a child crying outside the vehicle before I lost consciousness, he whispered. Then someone kept trying to open the door. Tears filled Claire's eyes immediately. Oh my God. Ryan looked speechless. The room fell silent except for the soft rain outside. For years, neither of them had known the truth. The struggling single mother cleaning floors inside his mansion, and the little boy fighting fever in a small apartment, had already saved Zayn al-Hadid long before they ever met again. Claire slowly sat across from him. I never knew it was you. I know. Zayn looked at her quietly. But somehow you still protected me twice. Claire's tears finally fell. Not because of money, not because of fear, but because suddenly everything felt larger than coincidence, like fate had quietly been pulling their lives together for years. Then, softly, a tiny voice echoed from the kitchen entrance. Mom! Claire turned instantly. Eli stood there beside Mrs. Whitmore, wearing a little red hoodie, still pale from sickness but awake. Eli! Claire rushed toward him immediately. The little boy smiled weakly before looking curiously toward Zayn. For several seconds, the billionaire simply stared at the child. Then Eli asked the innocent question that completely shattered the remaining distance between them. Are you staying with us now? Claire froze. Ryan looked away quietly. And for the first time in years, Zayn al-Hadid felt something inside his chest that no amount of wealth had ever been able to buy. Home. 3 months later, the Al-Hadid Foundation headquarters officially opened in downtown Manhattan. But unlike the luxury towers Zayn al-Hadid once built for investors and celebrities, this building was different. There were no velvet ropes, no exclusive guest lists, no cameras flashing around wealthy elites pretending to care about charity for publicity. Instead, the enormous glass building welcomed single mothers, low-income workers, injured employees, and struggling families from across New York. People who had spent most of their lives feeling invisible, just like Claire Bennett once had. The morning sunlight poured through the tall windows as volunteers prepared for the foundation's grand opening ceremony. Staff members moved quickly through the lobby, carrying boxes of supplies, while children laughed near the reception area. And for the first time in years, the sound of happiness filled the building naturally. Not artificially. Claire stood near the entrance, adjusting a stack of paperwork in her arms, while trying to calm her nerves. She still wasn't fully used to this new life. 6 months ago, she had been scrubbing marble floors inside a mansion where people barely looked at her. Now she was director of outreach programs for one of the largest employee support foundations in the country. Sometimes it still felt unreal. "You're pacing again." Claire looked up instantly. Zane stood beside the lobby staircase, wearing a dark navy suit without a tie, looking far more relaxed than the cold billionaire she first met months ago. His vision still wasn't perfect. Bright lights occasionally bothered him, and he still attended medical treatment regularly. But he no longer hid behind dark glasses or pretended weakness. And somehow, that honesty had changed him completely. Claire smiled softly. "I just want everything to go well. It already is." His voice remained calm, but now there was warmth inside it that hadn't existed before. Claire glanced toward the crowded lobby. Hundreds of workers and families had arrived already. Many of them former employees from hotels and corporations who had suffered abuse, unpaid wages, or unfair treatment for years. People Zane once might never have noticed. Not because he was cruel, because wealth had isolated him from reality, until Claire, until Eli, until the truth forced him to finally see the world differently. A tiny blur of red suddenly ran through the lobby. "Mom!" Claire laughed as Eli rushed toward her wearing his favorite bright red hoodie. The 6-year-old looked much healthier now. His cheeks finally carried color again, and the exhaustion that once surrounded him had slowly disappeared after months of treatment. Zane crouched slightly as Eli reached them. "You're supposed to stay with Mrs. Whitmore." Eli grinned mischievously. "She talks too much." Claire sighed dramatically. "That sounds familiar." Zane laughed quietly, a real laugh. The kind nobody inside the mansion had ever heard before Natalie disappeared from his life. Across the lobby, reporters began gathering near the stage area as foundation staff prepared for the opening speech. Ryan Keller approached holding several documents. "The media wants confirmation about the criminal trial date." Zane's expression darkened slightly. Natalie Sterling and Marcus Doyle were still awaiting trial for fraud, conspiracy, financial theft, and evidence tampering connected to the crash investigation. The case had shocked the country, especially after investigators discovered the brake failure in Zane's SUV had indeed been intentional. Natalie denied everything publicly, but the evidence against her kept growing. Ryan lowered his voice. "There's also pressure from investors asking if you'll return to the hotel expansion project." Zane looked around the foundation lobby silently, then toward Claire, helping Eli fix his tiny shoelace. Finally, he answered calmly. "No." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "No? I built enough buildings for rich people already." The security chief smiled slightly. "That's going to terrify Wall Street." "Good." Claire looked up from Eli's shoes. "You're really changing your entire company structure?" Zane nodded once. The foundation behind them wasn't symbolic charity. It was real. Employee protection programs, emergency housing, medical support for single parents, scholarships for workers' children, legal protection for exploited employees, everything Zane once believed successful corporations would never need to care about, until he met the people forced to survive without protection. "I spent years believing strength meant never depending on anyone," Zane said quietly. His eyes moved toward Eli. "But the truth is, the people who helped me most had the least power." Claire felt emotion tighten inside her chest, because she understood exactly what he meant. The ceremony officially began moments later. Cameras flashed softly while guests gathered around the stage. But unlike the glamorous parties Natalie once hosted, this crowd looked different. Nurses, hotel workers, construction employees, single parents holding children in their arms. People who looked nervous simply being invited inside such a beautiful building. Claire recognized that feeling. She used to feel it too. Ryan handed Zane the microphone. The room slowly quieted. For several seconds, Zane simply looked out across the crowd. Then he began speaking. "Most people know me as a businessman." His deep voice echoed gently through the lobby. "They know the hotels, the companies, the headlines." Silence filled the room. But very few people know what it feels like to lose everything you thought made you powerful. Claire watched him carefully from the front row. "When I lost my sight," Zane continued, "I believed the hardest part would be darkness." His gaze slowly shifted toward Claire and Eli. "I was wrong." But room remained completely silent now. "The hardest part was discovering how many people only valued me when I appeared strong." Emotion flickered briefly across his face. "But I also discovered something else." He paused. "That kindness often comes from people the world refuses to notice." Claire lowered her eyes as tears filled them instantly. Zane smiled softly. A maid, a little boy, a struggling mother, gling. Nobody in the room moved, because suddenly the billionaire standing on stage no longer sounded powerful. He sounded human. "And they reminded me," he said quietly, "that the people society calls small are often the ones carrying the greatest hearts." The entire lobby erupted into applause, but Claire barely heard it. Because at that exact moment, Eli reached for Zane's hand naturally, and Zane held it without hesitation, like they had always belonged together. Maybe they had, because sometimes life gave people wealth, and sometimes it gave them a second chance to truly see. Never judge someone by their appearance, their job, or their social status. True character reveals itself in difficult moments, and kindness always leaves a mark on the lives it touches. The people who seem powerless today may become the reason someone survives tomorrow. If this story touched your heart, comment where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories like this.